Military Readiness Subcommittee. He's also a doctor. He's got a PhD in public administration, so he knows a little about that stuff and what's going on. He's also, I have now installed him as the favorite to be the 2017 nominee for governor of the Republican Party of Virginia. And, of course, my predictions are never wrong. I predicted Donald Trump would be the nominee. Everybody laughed at me in May, and now, once again, I'm right. It's like an albatross I carry around my neck. Congressman, good to have you with us.
Good morning, John. It's fantastic to be with you this morning.
Let's go to this Planned Parenthood fiasco. This is disturbing, Congressman, to a lot of people. This is a very emotional issue, especially when we've got the White House now coming out and rather than talking about why our tax dollars are being utilized for harvesting baby feet, hands, livers, brains, and hearts, they're blasting the people that did the video. This is just disturbing to a lot of people trying to figure out, why are my tax dollars going to this organization?
Exactly, John. I'll tell you, what absolute barbarism here. Again, I believe breaking the law. The law says that you are not allowed to sell these parts for profit. It's obvious in the videos that we see that Planned Parenthood is brokering to get the highest price for these baby parts and fetal tissue. It's unbelievable the depths that this organization has gone to. And then the White House wants to distract from the real issue here. They want to blame those folks that are bringing this to light. God bless them for doing that, so that we can all see. And John, this cuts across the spectrum. This is not an issue of party, and it should not be. This should be an issue of our humanity, of how we look at each other, about how we look at life, about how we consider what's proper and what's not proper. And anybody that looks at this and says, this is okay, the issue is with the person that took the video, is just not seeing the treachery and barbarism that's going on here. I just am beside myself. And, this is one of those instances, too, where if people don't speak up, and Congress must act on this, must defund Planned Parenthood. We should not in any way, shape, or form be sending government funds there. I believe there needs to be an investigation of Planned Parenthood. I believe, as the law is written today, that they are breaking the law. I want to make sure that they are prosecuted to the full extent of the law, as well as making sure that they receive no federal funds. And this should be a bipartisan issue. This is about who we are as human beings. I mean, how anybody can look at this and go, "Oh, I'm going to disregard how barbaric this is. This issue is about the people that brought this to light." Goodness knows, I am so glad that they did that, so people can see the true depths of the barbarism of this organization.
It's very disturbing to a lot of people, and I hope you guys get to the bottom of it. Look, Congressman, there's a lot of frustration out there amongst Republicans like me that don't see really anything meaningful happening. So when we talk about defunding, it sounds great in a soundbite, but is this something that could actually happen, and how?
I do believe it can happen, John. Now, will the path be difficult? Absolutely. As you know, the president says that he will veto it, and if you look at the number of times that vetoes are overridden, that number, unfortunately, is small. But it should not stop us from bringing this to the attention of the public. And I believe when we do, I believe the public will look at this and go, you're right. This should not be happening. Congress should be acting. They should not be receiving government funds to do these things. So I think we have an obligation to do that, regardless about how we may think about the odds of the outcome. I think we still must get in there and fight this. And I think it's fundamental to who we are as human beings. I mean, it should never be a Republican versus Democrat thing. This should be about what are we doing to make sure that we stand against this treachery and barbarism. I mean, that to me is the simple issue here. And I understand. I'm as frustrated as everybody else is, because Congress needs to be acting, needs to be getting things done. And, John, one of the things that I've been very vocal about is Congress ought to be in Washington right now. We left Washington essentially the day before yesterday. The Congress went into what's called a pro forma session, which is I call make-believe Congress. Somebody comes in once a week, bangs the gavel, nobody's there, so they dispense with nothing, and then move on to the next week. We ought to be in Washington with all these things here before us. We have these appropriations bills to do. We have the Iran nuclear deal to be discussing. We have the debt ceiling to be discussing. We have Planned Parenthood issues to be discussing. Why we leave Washington for 5 weeks is beyond me, and that's what frustrates people. I understand people want to go back home and do that for a week or two in August. And I've written a letter to the Speaker say, call us back immediately to Washington. Here are the things we have before us. Let's get these things done. And that's why people are frustrated, John. They want to see us getting things done, and they at least want to see us there acting on those things. I tell folks one thing we can't do is to guarantee outcome, but we can guarantee 100% effort, and that's what people want out of their elected officials is 100% effort, 100% plus, I would argue.
Did the Speaker respond?
Not yet. I'm awaiting his response. I don't know if I will receive one. I hope that I do, but I have asked him to call us back into session, and because the Senate is going to be in for one more week, for them to act on at least the 7 appropriations bills that the House has acted upon. I mean, if the Senate will act upon those, we can at least get to the point of working out the differences and send some of these to the President's desk. Short of that, then we're back in this process of these continuing resolutions. With John, that is no way to budget. That is ridiculous. It's these short-term, kick-the-can down the road provisions, and that's why people get frustrated. That's why I'm frustrated. We continue to see that happen. So I'm going to continue to push the Speaker to call us back to Washington. I told folks I am ready, willing, and able to immediately change my schedule and come back to Washington.
Congressman, very quickly, before we talk about the highway bill and kicking the can down the road, Mark Meadows, your colleague, filing a motion to vacate, basically an embarrassment to the Speaker. I don't think that's going to get out of rules. What have people been saying up there when he did that? What's the buzz?
Well, I think everybody there was kind of taken aback about it, and from across the board, from the folks in the Freedom Caucus to others, have said our attention needs to be during this recess period talking about these important issues. Talking about the Iran nuclear deal, talking about what we need to do to make sure we're properly funding our military, talking about issues like Planned Parenthood and what Congress is going to be doing about those things. And to have this come up, I think, unfortunately, takes the attention away from that. And I like Mark. Mark's a great guy, and let me tell you, I've had my share of disagreements with the Speaker, but in the middle of a term, to be able to do that, and as chaotic as that would be for the body, because there's no line of succession. It's not like if the president were to resign that you have a vice president there to go. If you were to remove the Speaker, then it would be chaos, and then there's no guarantee that you wouldn't have somebody more liberal than the Speaker. So and there's nobody that stood up and says, hey, listen, I want to jump in and do this, and so from that standpoint, while again I understand people's frustration, this is not the way to go about this now. And as I said, I've had my share of disagreements with the Speaker. In fact, he's been pretty vocal with me and has actually been pretty cross with me on a number of occasions. But as much as I disagree with him and would like to see things in many instances go a different way, and I continue to push him to do that, I just don't think that this was a productive way to make that happen. I understand people's frustration out there, and we've had some people call, but I can tell you, I think there's only 2 or 3 people in the entire body there that have said that this is the way to go about addressing their frustrations with the Speaker.
Well, Congressman, we know your battles with the Speaker are well chronicled. You're probably not going to be on the top of his Christmas list. I don't think you'll be getting Cincinnati Reds tickets or anything like that. But
no,
you got to fight. You got to stand ground and fight for what you believe in. Kicking the can down the road. Now we get to the highway bill. Passes the Senate, but with that, Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, puts in the reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank. Many people like me think that's just more corporate cronyism. Then the House extends it, continuing 3 months. This is what is really bothering people. I mean, you got a highway bill. Everybody understands it. You got to fix the roads. The Senate, McConnell slips in the Export-Import Bank reauthorization, just slips it in. It's just very frustrating. Nothing is changing. What's in you?
Well, you're exactly right, John. I'm frustrated too because, first of all, we need to be doing a long-term highway bill, and we need to make sure that we're looking at, several things. Not just how do we make sure that we're not continuing to have to go to the general fund to borrow money from the general fund to do this. This ought to be self-sustaining. And by the way, I think we can do that with economically productive changes to our tax code, things like reducing the repatriation tax, which actually would encourage economic growth and dedicate those funds solely to the Transportation Trust Fund. Those are the things that we need to be getting into a long-term bill so that we don't have to, as you said, kick the can down the road every 3 months, 6 months, a year, which has been what's happening with the transportation bill. And then it makes it very difficult for states to plan, makes it very difficult for us to address these transportation issues in the long term. And goodness knows, here in Virginia and through the length of my district, from the Northern Virginia area to the Fredericksburg area to the Peninsula area, we see on a daily basis the issues we have to deal with roads, and people want us to be getting those things done. And then on top of that, another thing that frustrates people is putting in issues into a bill that have nothing to do with the bill, and that's why I think people are so frustrated. First of all, we're saying, well, why would you add this EXIM bank reauthorization to a highway bill? It has nothing to do with it, and we in the House look at it the same way and said, listen, the decision has already been made about EXIM Bank not to reauthorize it. The House did not act to reauthorize it. That means that we wanted the authorization to expire, and then to be able to send it back to us is mind-boggling to me. And again, one of those things that just adds to the nation's frustration about how Congress operates. So, and thank goodness Kevin McCarthy stood up and said, listen, we're not going to take up that bill. We are not going to take it up. And unfortunately, we sent them over now a 3-month extension to try to get to a point where we have a bill that addresses transportation in the long term and doesn't have unrelated pieces to it. And as you know, a number of senators over there said, well, listen, if you're going to allow this unrelated amendment to it, then we'll put in some other unrelated amendments. And as you know, they had a little bit of disagreement over there about the extent to which that should happen. But that's another one of those things that frustrates people about Congress. And when you add that to Congress going home in August, then adding unrelated things to bills, not getting other jobs done like appropriations, not taking up issues like the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, I'm like you. I can sense the frustration out there with people to say, things have to get done.
Congressman, it's dramatic, and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's a huge amount, and it's even beyond frustration. It's just, people want change, and it's not happening. And this export-import thing, this bank, which Truth in Advertising, I am 100% opposed to it being reauthorized. That's my commentary on it. But I mean, if you're gonna have a vote to reauthorize it, then let's have an honest debate, two sides of the aisle, for and against. Let's have a debate. Let's talk about the pros and the cons, and then let's hold everybody accountable to reauthorizing it or not. But to just slip it in when obviously the House was not favorable to reauthorizing it, or they already would have done that, right?
That's correct, and I've been out there on the record saying that I'm opposed to EXIM Bank for a variety of reasons, and I've had folks call that are in favor of it. I do think that there are many other mechanisms out there by which people can just as effectively, if not more so than the EXIM Bank, access funds to trade internationally and to have that conduit to trade internationally. So for the Senate to say, well, now we are going to take up something that the House has already clearly stated its position on, and has said we are going to allow it to expire, the reauthorization not to occur, for the bank to expire, and now to push this back, is just counter to what the House has said, and that's why I'm glad that Kevin McCarthy stood strong and said, no, we are not taking up the bill, period, and that's the way it should happen, because people want us up there, standing strong, and again, doing the job of the public, making sure we're reflecting, what we hear from folks, and then standing on those principles. So we've done that. When we get back, we'll work on another transportation bill, and on top of all these other things. September is going to be a crazy month, and John, again, I go back. September would not be a crazy month if we would do our job and be there in August, and go back in and at least clear the table of some of these things, because then what we end up with is trying to get lots of things done in a small amount of time, which limits debate and it limits the options. So I think the speaker would do well to call us back, at least in for a couple of weeks, to be able to clear the table of some of these things before we come back after Labor Day.
Everybody else is working.
Exactly. Everybody else. I mean, this is a situation where, and John, in what other job can somebody with a desk full of work go home for 6 weeks or 5 weeks? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. The American public looks at that, and it solidifies in their mind that Congress is not doing the job it's there to do. Absolutely. And they look at that and they go, wow, you've got all this work to do, and how could you go home for 6 weeks? I mean, I could see a week or two, but 5 weeks, it's just mind-boggling to me.
It's not consistent with the what other Americans have to do to make ends meet. I want to get to the international front, Congressman. Big development recently. Our NATO ally, the only Muslim country in NATO, Turkey, biggest army outside of the U.S. and NATO, now changing positions finally and looking at engaging ISIS on the Syrian border with Turkey with ground troops. Is this a game changer for this region?
John, I think it can be. We have encouraged, as you know, and I have spoken out about making sure that Turkey was engaged in this, with them being next door to Syria and the issues that they deal with both ISIS and the PKK, which is another terrorist organization in the region. I have spoken out. I've traveled there. I've spoken to their leadership there about becoming engaged. I'm glad that they are doing that. Their engagement needs to be coordinated with U.S. Efforts, as well as the efforts of the Iraqi government and other regional governments there that are working to defeat ISIS in the area. I do believe that with what they have at their avail, they can change the pace at which ISIS is being pushed back and defeated. Right now, we are making some gains, but they are small gains, and the path to victory there is an arduous one at best. So with Turkey now becoming part of that, allowing missions to be flown out of their facilities there, and then for their ground troops also to be part of this, yes, is a game changer. Now, the question remains is, what will they do, and what resources will they devote to doing it? That's the piece of the puzzle yet to be placed on the table, and we have an opportunity to push them to do as much as they can possibly do, and they have an awful lot that they can bring to the table. But I think the reason they're doing it, John, is because they see what ISIL can particularly do to Turkey, and they've seen some signs of that moving into Turkey, as well as the PKK. So I think that they've said if they don't fight them there in Syria, they'll be fighting them there in Turkey. So I'm glad that they have finally seen the light and are willing to come on board and help us with this effort.
Well, I think it is a big development. We'll certainly be watching it, and no one that we have on is more informed on the area than is Congressman Rob Wittman. We are out of time. For more information, go to whitman.house.gov, whitman.house.gov. You can sign up for his newsletter there. And by the way, just saying, I think you'd make a great governor of Virginia. I just wanted to toss that out there. 8:29 on the John Fredericks Show. I believe that Rob Wittman is going to run for governor, and I believe he's going to be the nominee, but that's just me. 8:29, Susan Crabtree coming up, Washington Examiner go to whitman.house.gov. Thanks, Rob.